My name is Sarah Richardson, and I'm the Manager of Business Development and Partnerships here at HRCI. And it's an honor for me to be here with you all today. So today's webinar topic that will be challenging, you all to tune in and listen to is building the connected HR ecosystem behind the most effective people teams. I am so excited to introduce you to today's three speakers, Poornima, Farrar, Maureen Mondesir, and Tara Cooper. Poornima is the Chief Product Officer at Rival, and she leads the global product and data sciences teams, and she is responsible for driving Rival's product vision and roadmap. She enjoys grounding product strategy and customer empathy and market understanding to ensure that solutions deeply resonate with clients and to shape the future of their work. She brings nearly 15 years of experience across product and technology roles, and she holds a PhD in linguistics from SUNY Buffalo. Welcome. Maureen is a talent and workforce strategy leader with experience building end-to-end recruiting, hiring, and onboarding programs that improve candidate experience, strengthen operational performance, and advance hiring outcomes. In her current work, she partners with leaders to design scalable processes, modernize talent technology, and develop high-trust, high-touch people practices that support growth. She's also the founder of Vivian's Care Group, a people-centered care services and staffing company focused on helping families access dependable, dignity-centered support while creating meaningful career pathways for caregivers. And last but not least, Tara. She's a 15-year veteran of the HR technology industry with a passion for innovative and disruptive tech. With extensive experience in building and executive go-to-market strategies for early and growth stage HR technology providers. Tara is a leading work tech analyst at Mercer, where she works to uncover and share industry trends and insights with HR tech buyers and vendors. Poornima, Maureen, and Tara, it's wonderful to have the three of you here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you all now so you can take it from here, and thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see HRCI participants again. We love working with you, learning from your best practices, and sharing what we're learning and seeing in the industry as well. I'm Poornima Farrar. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Rival. Today I'm joined by two incredible speakers and some of my favorite people in HR tech, Tara Cooper, and Maureen Mondesir. In case you're not familiar with us at Rival, we are the talent platform that connects how HR teams find, launch, and develop talent. From first touch to full potential, our modular suite of products help you find the best people, launch them faster, and support their development throughout the employee lifecycle. We do this by being modular, i.e. Essentially tacking onto your existing HCM or system of record, or providing the full suite of solutions depending on your needs. But let's get to our speakers. Tara and Maureen, thank you so much for being here. And let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. We're here to talk about something that's very real for HR leaders. You're being asked to move faster. You're being asked to do more with less. You're being asked to deliver measurable business outcomes, adopt AI, and modernize technology, and somehow do all of that while connecting the human heart of HR. At Rival, we call this human-centered change. And we know that there's tension in terms of, what is needed versus what tools you have in your stack, and that is exactly what today's conversation is about. We'll be grounding it in Mercer's operating by design framework. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about, what the foundation of HR tech, AI, or any modern technology looks like. Number one, it's the data. We know that data is the core of the trust that is being built in HR organizations. If we can't trust the data, then we can't trust the insights that are coming from that data. Number two, we know that the data connectivity across different systems, different tools, becomes the most critical part of how systems can interact as an ecosystem, as one platform, so that HR can stop thinking about the data flow and start thinking about the outcomes and experiences instead. And then the third piece is that it really is not about technology, but it's about what technology represents and the space for care that technology can provide. So really driving that automation and ensuring that the friction is removed via technology instead of having technology add more friction into the system. So We have heard from many of you that these are some of the core pain points that you're seeing when it comes to building connected ecosystem for HR, and that will be the grounding of the discussion today. So with those perspectives in mind, we know that this aligns closely with the operating by design model that Mercer will present next, which will really reframe technology more as a support layer, or sorry, not just as a support layer, but more from the perspective of a fabric that an entire organization should be thinking through from a digital perspective. So Tara, let me turn it over to you to walk us through some of your research as well as the operating model itself.
Thank you, Poornima. All right. If you want to advance this one, I love to start with why we even talk about the operating model at all. We're obviously in a world of constant change. I don't think any of us want change just for change's sake. But when we look at how the operating model works today and what's happened for decades is the HR operating models were designed around scarcity. Limited time, limited capacity, limited access to information. And so our traditional three-pillar model worked because it optimized those constraints. Centralization, standardization, and segmentation were used to help us do things at scale. But that world is gone. AI has now changed the equation, and knowledge is no longer scarce. Capacity is now elastic. And so when you look at always centralizing, you actually look to slow down the pace of movement, which is the antithesis of what AI is pushing us to do. Standardization is no longer necessary when AI can produce hyper-personal experiences at scale. And when we think about segmentation, well, that becomes a limiter for AI, which actually excels with access to more data. So the real constraints today center around constraints of human agency, really. Connected, accessible data, governance, trust, and really the speed of change. So if you want to advance this one more slide here, when we think about operating by design, it starts with the fundamental shift of moving from organizing HR around processes to organizing around outcomes. So the goal isn't to run payroll or to manage recruiting. The goal is people being paid accurately and on time, teams being fully staffed and capable, and employees understanding and trusting the systems that affect them. And in this model, as Poornima mentioned, technology isn't a support layer. It really becomes the digital fabric of the organization or the connective tissue that links data, workflows, and decisions across the entire employee lifecycle and across the entire organization. So think of it kind of like memory for the entire business, weaving together all parts of the business and moving us beyond the scattered memory that lives today only in people's heads or in segmented systems. So think about even the latest AI models, the GPT models that you might be using in your personal world. Those encompass the entirety of all websites and content. And that's really the same concept when we think of digital fabric. It's not a singularity of one part of the business or one tool or one process, but the totality of all the knowledge across the organization, making tech the common source for unique organizational knowledge. And so the operating model itself becomes a living system. It's able to flex and reconfigure as the business needs, the workforce expectations, and AI capabilities themselves all evolve. So that's the framework, but the framework only matters if it actually improves how work feels and functions day to day. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, it's such an interesting breakdown in terms of the guiding principles, right? Because when you really think about start from the future, that future state, how do people go about building out what that ideal future state looks like? Who are some of the stakeholders, Tara, that you think should be involved? And Maureen, I would kind of love your take here too of, what does that breakdown look like in terms of identifying the future, identifying the outcomes, and then setting up the next steps?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So when we think about how things are structured today, it tends to be very siloed, right? We have HR over here in this pocket. We have IT over in this pocket. We have finance over here. When you think about that from an employee perspective, it makes absolutely no sense. I need something from my employer, I need something from the business, and now I have to remember tons of different systems to go to. So it's about breaking down those silos and thinking about how we create common goals and common visions and a common framework for everyone to operate from. So it's not about HR versus IT. It's about having those two come together and design for the future. And also to when you start to bring people together in these unique ways where you've got subject matters from the business itself, but also those that understand the tech and how it can move things forward, and those that understand the data, when you start to bring all of those elements together, you can challenge the assumption of how things have always been. Because that's what, when we're designing for the past, it's, well, we're stuck in these systems. We have to keep going with these systems. This offers us a new way to break all of that down, come together collaboratively to create a framework in which we build a future that works for everyone.
Absolutely. So thinking a little bit about how do we maybe break down the system and data silos, where manual work is that ideally ought to be removed, where they can be better data or better insights, maybe looking at opportunities to adopt AI. Maureen, thoughts here?
Absolutely. It's so funny. I too, when I first saw the operating this model from Mercer, I gravitated from, with the number one, the start from the future. And I realized, and I was just thinking through this and, really thinking about the employee experience, just like Tara mentioned, and really seeing this through an opportunity to collaborate and be better partners across the business. And Tara, it's so funny because I'm echoing the same thing that you're mentioning, but I think that's so essential. Just thinking through, even from a new hire experience, oftentimes we're thinking about access, we're thinking about ensuring that individuals have equipment. And so where does that begin? And I loved how I think when I read through the white pages, there was actually a term that Mercer uses where it really breaks down the different groups that can be utilized to really thinking about how do you bring individuals together and businesses together. Tara, what was that? I want to make sure I'm using the Mercer's term for it.
So we have an AI Center of Excellence. I think that's the team that you're thinking of, which is a great starting point for organizations because it's additive to what they're doing. It doesn't, no rip and replace required, which I know is a lot of work, but it's an additive layer that helps connect innovation at the AI level across the enterprise as opposed to having it just happen in these silos.
Right. And it's that integration of HR and IT, but also best practices, right? Understanding kind of what the ideal state looks like, which can be built out, to your point, from that operational excellence model. That can be really interesting. Let me ask another question. Where in terms of empowering wisdom workers, and kind of allowing people to focus on their judgment and creativity, what are some of the ways, Maureen or Tara, that you've seen, companies do this well, and where maybe some pitfalls that we should think about?
Yeah, I think organizations that are doing this well are focusing on creating space for agency. So it's not, and when I say agency, I do not mean that we just let employees run wild and use whatever tools they want to do whatever they want with whatever data they want. It's about putting the right guardrails in place, being transparent about those guardrails, why they exist, how we operate within them, and then allowing people to operate freely within those so they can get creative, they can cross collaborate, and they can start to make real impact. So I think it's that element. We like to think that technology is the magic bullet here. This is actually a mindset shift that we have to make inside of our organizations to prepare us to not think in the silos that we've had in the past, but to think east-west instead of north-south.
For sure. Yeah. Let's poll the audience. I would love to kind of get a take on what are some of the biggest challenges that are holding you back from delivering better outcomes today? Is it disconnected systems and data silos? Is it too much manual work and not having enough time? And sorry that we're making you do a single choice here. It may be the case that there's more than one. Is it the lack of trust in data and insights, or a pressure to adopt AI without understanding the business strategy? Because we'd love to hear what you're seeing in the market, and then tying that back to some of the reporting and research that we're coming up with on our end. Any predictions? Maureen,
Oh, I would say my prediction is I'm hoping to see a high number percentage on disconnected systems and data.
are you? Okay. Tara?
I probably think the very last one is true that there's a lot of pressure to adopt without clear business strategy, but I'm on the border with data and insights too because there's a lot of doubt in the data that we have.
Interesting. Okay. I think oh,
Ah, I was dead wrong.
Wow.
I didn't want to say this, but I actually thought it would be too much manual work. And I think so let's talk about this a little bit. So 43% of you felt that, not having enough time, seeing too much manual work is kind of the number one challenge that is holding you back from delivering better outcomes today. And a close second is essentially the fact that there are disconnected systems and data silos. It's possible the two are related. We do notice that several of you didn't vote, so maybe the numbers could be a little bit skewed in one direction or the other. And then there's the pressure to adopt AI without a clear business strategy. And then last but not least, that trust in data and insight. So let's talk about this. What are Maureen, as an HR exec, what are some of the most common manual work, not enough time scenarios, that you saw in terms or you see in the market in terms of delivering better outcomes?
Interestingly enough, my money was going to be on disconnected systems and data, and I think they are parallel to the
Yeah.
manual work. And, oftentimes, HR, we have so many different tech stacks. We're finding that we find ourselves entering data in one system, entering in another system. The data does not come true. And so I think that produces a lot of manual work. And I see manual work coming in from entering the employee into the system. Then, we have a different system for background checks. So then the compliance piece of it. And then once they're hired into payroll may have a completely different system. And it's interesting because HR.com found that 30% of HR teams are held back due to disconnected systems. And they're not even able to really think through their key goals because of the system is really creating so much work. And so I kind of feel like those two are connected, Poornima.
I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned a word that I've heard a lot this year already from our clients, which is compliance.
Yeah.
So compliance from what we're seeing is kind of the core piece that is creating so much rework because there's this expectation that if your data is in multiple systems or if any part of your tooling or systems are disconnected for compliance reasons, everything needs to be maintained and reviewed and checked before before you send content on a new hire to a background check vendor. Make sure that all your systems have the same information about that candidate/new hire. Right? One example. Another is if you're sending information to payroll versus benefits versus your manager, make sure that all the data is unified and in one place. And then often that kind of platform strategy of if you put everything in one system, things will be magical is not working. And that's a big part of why there's so much manual rework too that we're often seeing. So there's almost this need for how do we have kind of a better automation layer or a orchestration layer that drives compliance better as opposed to just trying to say, okay, pass the data through in different places and let's hope it works. So I agree with you. I think that's probably a big part of where the manual work is emerging. Tara, thoughts here?
Yeah, I will say yes and to this. I think this also stems from a long tradition that we have of instead of redesigning work, just adding more work to the plate. And that's what we've started to do in the age of AI too. It's not necessarily using AI to free up more of our time and give us more time for creative thought or anything like that. It's more, okay, but how much more productivity can we squeeze out of this? And so I think, again, this is a mindset shift of it's not all about that short-term thinking and that short-term gain, but how are we creating long-term strategies for connectivity, for agility, for being able to, have a composable type of atmosphere where your tech stack can move with you instead of holding you back. And so it's true in tech, but it's also true on the work side too, that we see a lot of manual work getting added that doesn't leave a lot of time to innovate and to get creative in a way that allows you to have a competitive edge. And that should really be the goal if we're going to be investing in AI.
For sure. So let's talk about AI for a minute. There's some great discussion happening in the chat on this topic as well. I think, you know, targeted AI makes sense, just like targeted investment into any technology makes sense, right? When we start to really think about, let's just transform an entire industry or an entire use case with AI, there has to be then more structured mindset shift, as you're saying, Kara, into what that looks like. Does it make sense? Where does the human factor come in? And there's already, I mean, we're on January 21st, and there's already been a lot of market research and conversation happening on kind of that AI topic. Obviously, I have my own thoughts on this topic as well, having spent my career innovating in HR tech. But I'd love to kind of hear from both of you when we're thinking about AI in HR, what are some of the things that we can do well? And also, more importantly, what are some of the concerns that you have in terms of things that could be done potentially not well? I'll leave it up to you two who wants to go first.
I can chime in if you want, Maureen.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
So when we think about, and I think this is true not just for AI, but when you think about technology in general, we like to approach it through this lens of where is the hands work, where's the heads work, where's the hearts work. That hands work being the work that keeps our hands literally busy and moving, but it doesn't really challenge us, and it's usually not the most fulfilling work inside of our role. We've got the heads work that challenges us to think and to make decisions and to process information. And then you've got hearts work, that stuff that's uniquely human, collaboration and connection and empathy and all of those things that are unique to us. And when we think about where we start to apply some technology, well, the first place you start to apply it is to that hands work, right? We want to eliminate that manual work that isn't very fulfilling, can easily be done in partnership with technology to make things go faster. But there's also the chance for AI to help augment our heads work, help us better connect data and insights and information and patterns that we can't really do as well just on our own. And when we do those things well, that leaves us to have all human control over and more time for that hearts work, that connective work, those pieces that really start to create the connective tissue inside of the organization to draw your clients in, to draw your employees in. Those are the sorts of things that we get to focus on. So I think we have to use that lens as we're looking at how we're looking to apply AI, because it is not designed to take over every interaction that we have. It's not designed to do those things, but it can be used in partnership with people to create much better experiences. And so thinking from an outcome mindset of not where can we apply AI on top of things, but what are the outcomes that we're driving towards? And how can we actually start to deliver those? AI will play a role in those, but it shouldn't always be that central answer. It is a part of the equation. It is not the full answer itself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tara,
for
I
sure.
agree. I agree. When I'm thinking about from the people first lens, and for me, when I'm testing this, it's really if decision affects dignity, livelihood, or the life events, or humans must remain visible and accountable. And when it comes to automation, where are the places that are routine tasks that AI can come in and streamline? And so it's very aligned with what you share about. I love how you call it the head, the heart. Yes. And so very
Yeah,
similar from the people first perspective.
yeah. I love that. Let's move to the next poll. As we kind of think about what concerns people would have on their side in terms of AI. Is it data quality and readiness, governance, compliance, and bias? I know some of you are already responding in the chat, but we'd love to get the poll response here. Losing the human touch in HR, and then knowing where to start or how to scale. Tara, I love the framework in terms of hands, heads, and hearts. I think the interesting part there is, how do we avoid the rework, right? Like when it really comes down to HR and AI, especially as we start to move into that hands work. To your point, it's kind of the most critical part of getting to heads and hearts. And often, if that first layer becomes turbulent, if you will, from lack of good data or incorrect governance or losing the human touch, what risks or concerns might actually surface up? So I'm curious, first to see what the poll results are, and then second, how that transformation is, especially as we start to build that into the operational layer, becomes something that does not require rework. And some of that rework might be great. It may be HR transformation. You move from kind of an operational mindset in one area to a strategic mindset, and saying we're going to have less disconnected tooling. We're going to have less concern about compliance concerns, etc. So fantastic. We see that there's actually a kind of breakdown between the biggest concerns being losing the human touch in HR, and then the governance, compliance, and bias layer as kind of the two biggest components. And then the data quality and readiness, as well as knowing where to start or how to scale, being less of a concern. Either because we already know, or because maybe that's not the area where our audience is kind of thinking about right now. Maureen, let's kind of start with you here. Well, I guess take on the poll results, as well as what do you think about the concerns that the audience is facing, and how they could potentially mitigate those?
Really, part of my guesses are wrong. My goodness, I thought the number one was going to be data quality and readiness. And it's interesting. HR Dive just released an article today talking about how nearly 40% of productivity gained in the workplace due to artificial intelligence is being lost due to rework, because the data is not secure. So it's interesting that that's number 3 or the 4th. And the poll results are really thinking about governance and losing the HR touch. And I think that, from my lens, that just shares, that tells me that there's not enough data around, how should HR be utilizing AI? What are the best practices around it? Where should we really be thinking about our services? And how are we thinking about our services along with the experience for the employees? And so these are the things that I'm thinking through as I look at this result. But Poornima, I am not doing well, because I thought data was going to be number one, and I was wrong. Tara, what did you think was going to be number one?
Well, Maureen, I will tell you, you and I should not go to the casino together. I was thinking that they weren't going to know how to start to scale, like where to begin. That's a question that we get a lot from organizations. But I think these answers are really telling. And you touched on something about HR using AI. A lot of the research that I've done around AI readiness shows that when HR teams themselves embed AI into how they work, into their everyday operations, it unlocks a whole bunch of goodness for the rest of the organization, because they bring that people-centric lens to the table. And when we think about something like governance, this is an area where we found that when HR is more heavily involved in driving AI strategy, so they're involved from the very top down with AI, meaning they're comfortable with it, they're talking about it, they're at the table, governance comes together much better, and companies are much more confident about how they're able to approach governance. So this is something where I think that we like to think in HR that maybe that's someone else's issue. It is very much our issue to address. We have to be concerned about governance, compliance, bias, because who owns bias. And this is one of the reasons why HR and IT can't be separate anymore. When we think about, recruiting solutions that are recommending candidates or making decisions for us in some cases to screen out candidates, who's responsible for that? Is that HR? Is that IT? Like, we have to get to the bottom of that accountability because there's a lot of trust at stake here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I have a slightly different take. And here's my take. In 2026, I think the impact of AI is a given. The adoption is kind of the place where we're starting to really measure AI, right? We're looking more for, is there ROI? Am I actually getting value out of it? Am I really thinking about in the market being competitive with others in my industry who may be using either the same or different HR best practices to either bring in new or better candidates or to create a stronger or better employee experience from a retention perspective, from a talent acquisition perspective. And so within that realm, you then start to look at, is bringing AI in helping me keep a better human touch and human experience or lose it? And I think it's a realistic concern because it kind of goes to both your points on the underlying things definitely being the core of that data quality needing to be strong in order to have a good AI system in place. But what I hear in these responses is that it's the actual adoption of AI that is the bigger concern for our audience right now, which I think is fantastic because it tells me that as an industry, we are more ready to actually start to think about adopting AI, but are really trying to understand, is the ROI actually there? And then how am I actually going to go about measuring it? It kind of gets me excited about 2026, right? Because it kind of it starts to tell us, Tara, to the point you were making, that we know that there's going to be governance challenges. We know that there's going to be compliance challenges or bias challenges. We're really now talking about tackling these and what is the right frameworks that we want to bring in? What are the expectations we're going to put on our vendors to say, give me the right tools or the frameworks to really start to answer these questions? So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun year for us as we start to build this out. I let's kind of talk a little bit about some of the biggest challenges that might come in the organization. So for both Tara and Maureen, if an HR leader listening today takes away just one mindset shift from the operating by design model, what would that be? What could be their biggest takeaway in terms of what this looks like?
I mean, I would say you need to get HR comfortable with AI. Like I was saying, our research shows that when HR uses AI inside of its own way of working, the rest of the organization benefits because you've now got a stage that you've earned the right to talk about the technology side of things and the people side of things and bring the two together to look at where the impact will be. It's going to make you better able to actively redesign work, better able to share AI information and give that agency that's required. We talk a lot about agentic AI agents, but we need human agency on the other side of that. You can't have tech have more agency than the humans that are used to power it. And so inside of HR, I know it's not necessarily been the place that we naturally gravitate in the past, but we have to get comfortable with AI. We have to be able to speak to it from a place of comfort and readiness so that we can be the stewards at the front end of the organization. So I would say create space to experiment it with inside of HR, to get comfortable, get creative, get educated, read about it, talk about it, ask others for inspiration, because the more you do that, the better equipped you'll be to create that human-centered design and human machine teaming aspect that's really needed to unlock all of those gains that we're betting on. They're not these incremental gains we're getting from just applying AI on top of what we're already doing. They come from us blowing things up and redesigning from the ground up. That takes us in HR being comfortable because that's a big people movement. That requires a lot of people to change what they're doing and for us to ready the people and their mindset and the entire organization for what's to come, not just put technology on top of something and expect that it's going to fix things.
Absolutely. I love that. Maureen, thoughts?
Yes, from my lens, one of the mindset shifts that I think is that I gathered from the operating by design model is really stop running HR like a separate function and really focus on designing it built on outcomes and trust. And so from the Vivian Care Group lens, this is exactly what the owners are asking for. They're not asking for more HR. They're asking for a faster time to start, stronger retention. They're looking for a workforce that is ready and supported. And so it's really thinking about the outcome first, trust always, and designing the model that delivers consistently and using AI to help support that.
Absolutely. I think outcome first, trust always. I love that. That's a great tagline. What's really interesting is that it kind of ties me back to that operational excellence model that we were talking about in terms of building out that center. Because something critical that you both said is that as we think about that outcome first, as we think about redesigning that process flow, how does one get started? Because as you're really seeing in a lot of these poll results, right, people are already talking about, I don't have enough time, there's so much rework. So there's the bandwidth and the need for the bandwidth. That's kind of part one. But then the second part of it is, how do I from there then start to how do I document my process flow? How do I show internally and externally, what does that journey look like? What does the transformation look like? Do I start in a certain part of my organization and then scale up or scale down? What do you guys think? Because, and let me also mention why I'm mentioning that. We often see a lot of failed layers through this, where people will come in and say, hey, I have this flow, or I'm bringing in this third party to really think about it, but then often not necessarily get the outcomes that they want. So what are some of the ways in which they can potentially approach that process flow layer?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things in there. So first of all, one of the ways to think about this is not to rip and replace. Like I talked about earlier, we don't want to completely tear everything down that we've built, but think about how you can start to layer in something like an AI Center of Excellence. We talked about that earlier. It spans the entire organization, and they become responsible for driving some of those things forward and connecting the dots across the organization so it's not as siloed as it was. But you also talked about something that I think is also very important when we start on these AI journeys, and I met with a client recently that when they kind of opened up the ability for all employees to submit ideas on how AI could make their life better, they immediately had over 300 ideas, which is overwhelming, right? So you have to think about, how do we prioritize where we start to look at transformation and how technology plays a role in that, and then how AI plays a role inside of that tech stack, right? And so this is one of the things in the operating model that we talk about, these outcome delivery teams that really help take signals from that digital fabric, understand the patterns, understand where the biggest gaps or opportunities might lie, and then help to be prescriptive through the data by connecting cross-collaboratively how we approach those things. So, where are those biggest points of friction? Where are the areas that we need the most help making better or faster decisions so that we can outcompete, our market? So those are the sorts of things that I think you have to think about. It's going to be additive at first, and then eventually the rest of your organization will naturally start to evolve to support these new disciplines. When you start to have the AI Center of Excellence and you start to have this focus on enterprise-wide AI, you start to also then see shared services will naturally be pushed towards breaking down the silos between HR, IT, finance, and so on and so forth. So it's a natural evolution that we have to look for. It doesn't mean it's not intentional, but it's not something that I expect organizations are going to do overnight, because that's just not how organizations are built to operate.
Hmm. And I'm thinking about this from the, what can HR do now, even in small bites lens. And I'm thinking prioritize, it actually goes very aligned, Tara. I feel like we're saying the same thing, but prioritizing outcome where people feel immediate impact. So, for instance, faster time to start, stronger early retention, manager readiness, those reduce frictions, and really think about the high impact outcomes. Before fixing a workflow or before even adding a tool, look at what is being duplicated. Where are there areas where connections, where there's disconnect between handoffs? Where can you automate where there's those routine tasks? Where can your team gain more capacity? And so that way it could really start to, especially in this day of change, I feel like HR can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the big impact areas, because the other thing we have to think about when we talk about Poornima's talk about adoption being a challenge here, well, you have to give people a reason to participate. And if the only outcome is I get more work because of this, that's not a good reason for me to participate. So how are we giving big outcomes to our employees to invite them into this transformation conversation to help us continue to make things better and better? So we also have to look at this from both sides of that equation. This is why we're trying to balance that human side with the technology, right? Is so that we can get the best from both sides of this.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So to you guys' point, one, let's pick a scenario, right? Like, where are the biggest reworks or biggest friction pain points? Is it in sourcing? Is it in pre-boarding? Is it in, you know, candidate matching when we're looking at high volume jobs? Is it in the time to fill rate when it comes to the hard to fill roles? As we, in most cases, what we see is that there are probably a series of scenarios, and essentially building out that ranking and being able to say, okay, we know exactly which of these processes, A, have the most pain point, or B, have the most impact for our organization, and C, as we really start to break those down into, you know, the workload relative to the impact, relative to how the outcome itself that we would want, can really start to give us like a breakdown from a process perspective. And I think from there, to what Tara and Maureen are saying, being able to then say, okay, what does best practice or best case scenario look like, and outlining that process flow. So let's say that we're looking at the opportunity for better sourcing. You know, what does the sourcing process today look like? Is it you're waiting for candidates to apply based on the jobs that you've already created, or do you already have a talent pool that you are nurturing throughout the year? Is nurturing the talent pool taking a long time? Does your tooling support that or not? And really starting to build out that flow and saying, this is what the best case looks like. And then looking at that collaboration with your vendor or your consulting team to look at the options from a tooling perspective on what's possible, what's available. We see this also in terms of the chasm of the scenarios where everything works and everything is fully automated, and then areas where, you know, there's often kind of a secondary process running and being very manual. A couple of common scenarios there is M&As. Often organizations don't build out an automation layer when it comes to M&As. At the same time, there is heavy compliance and governance risk when it comes to M&As. So you want to make sure that when you're acquiring a new company, often people are you know, you have processes that require them to get a new offer letter. You want to make sure that they're on the right payroll system. You want to make sure that they understand what the benefits are. New managers are tracking the progress of the employees that are transitioning over to them. And so that could be an interesting scenario of saying, we're going to take a process that is entirely not automated and then transform that, or alternatively pick a process where you know that there's a lot of automation, but there are gaps within the system that can be improved further. So we've definitely seen kind of both sides of the of the flow. And what we often find is that it depends, one, on the buy-in, and then two, on the, as Tara and Maureen have been saying, the kind of the impact that is understood by the organization, and kind of being very important there. We are seeing some questions come in from the audience as well. But let me ask one last thing, Tara and Maureen, on something that comes up a lot at Rival, and then we'll have Sarah come in and start to direct us towards the audience questions. Obviously, over the last several years, we've talked a lot as an industry about skills-based hiring, skills-based assessment, and just the overall impact of skills. In kind of the conversation that we're having about disconnected systems and how we can improve across the board, let's talk about skills for HR. What skills do you think they need to develop in order to thrive in that human-machine teams? And what are some of the things that you've seen work and impact or improvement that you would want to have? Sarah?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I'm going to actually tie this. I don't think this is just for HR, but I think it's as important for HR, especially because I'm saying you should get further into AI and get more comfortable with it. But think about the 80-20 rule, where in the past, about 80% of a worker's time was spent doing the work, and about 20% of their time was spent reviewing said work. In the age of AI, that flips. About 20% of your time becomes doing the work, and about 80% of your time becomes focused on reviewing that work and challenging that work and getting that work to a final state. And so when we think about that future, we're looking at skills like judgment, discernment, contextual reasoning, and those sorts of things becoming incredibly important, because we're no longer focused on creating an output, but on analyzing it and vetting it and really getting it to that final state. And on top of that, you're going to see a lot more push towards skills like AI fluency, outcome-based problem solving, and probably most importantly, and this has to come from HR if you want it to exist anywhere else in your organization, being comfortable with continuous change. That is a skill that is going to become increasingly more valuable inside of organizations.
Tara, I had 3 skills and you named 2 of them. It was data.
I love it.
It was understanding the workflow design, like really designing workflow to really think about the care for our employees and the people behind the work, and then strong judgment. And so you and I are very aligned here.
Yes,
Love that.
I absolutely love that. And yes, understanding, getting closer to how the work works,
Yeah.
I think is going to be so incredibly important. And I think that's what drew a lot of us into this industry. And then we get kind of shuffled to the side because of compliance concerns, because of these other pieces that aren't quite working the right way. So again, how much can we use technology to take some of that off of our plates and allow us to get better and deeper into those things that we want to do in HR that we don't get a chance to do enough of today?
Yes. And when I'm thinking about HR, it's so tough for us to decide what to automate. So by understanding what the works are and how they work and understanding the system, I think that really helps us keep what we should humanize and what really should be focused on the tech side, and how to communicate that change that really builds trust over time.
For sure. Let's go into some additional questions from the audience as well. You know, there are some fantastic ones here. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Rita asks, do you truly think AI will take over our jobs or take over certain aspects, which in turn would lead to less of us? Tara, what do you think?
So listen, I know this is tough to hear right now because we're surrounded by headlines that tell us the opposite, but the data shows that there will be more jobs created by this rise in AI than there will be disrupted. But we're in that disrupted phase right now, and I think it's hitting especially hard in the tech sector, in sectors that haven't necessarily been hit by previous disruptions as hard. And we're seeing a lot of headlines around this, right? Will it change jobs? Yes, 100%. It's already changing jobs. It's already eliminating some jobs, especially entry-level jobs. There is data around that shows that those, again, we talked about hands work. I work in a consulting firm. That's how junior consultants get started. We do the hands work and you work your way up. And there's got to be different ways for us to bring in junior level employees and start to bring them in with different understandings than what we have before. So will the workplace change? Yes, it's going to change. It's going to look a lot different, and a lot of jobs are going to shift and change. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other jobs and roles on the other side, which is why
Yeah.
being able to be agile and be willing to learn and unlearn is going to be so important. And one of the most important skills for any worker in the workforce to have in this age is to be adaptable, because you're not sure what's going to come next. If the CEO of OpenAI can't predict what the next 5 years brings with AI and he's the one building it, then we have to be prepared for almost anything. And that includes making sure our workforce is prepared for what could come next, because a lot of jobs will shift and change in ways that we haven't imagined just yet.
Yeah.
Indeed.
From my perspective, I see it as tech brings speed and people bring care. And so, in essence, we work together. And so, I think there's an opportunity for more partnership with how we view tech. How do we use AI? How are we looking at our tech stack? And so, while I do, from the talent perspective, Tara's right. We have seen a shift in work and how we work, but I'm seeing it from how can we do this together? How can we provide the services that we truly want to deliver in HR? And focus on the people care and experience.
Yeah, indeed, and I love that phrasing, Maureen. I also think it's that transformation layer that ultimately I think will be driven by the people that are actually using the products and saying we want this transformation. We need to rethink our processes. We don't to use Tara's earlier metaphor, want to be stuck in the hands work. Our strength, and a lot of the audience is echoing this, is in the hearts, is in the heads work. And how we do that better is where new technology, whether it is AI, it's automation, it's better analytics, all needs to really come and tie together. So it could be a super interesting flow. Couple more questions. In your opinion, which HR tasks should be automated versus kept human led? I know we've been talking about this for a little bit, and there were some examples that we talked about. But Maureen, what's kind of top of mind for you on something that you'd really want to see from an HR task perspective, just either remain human led or be automated? And Tara, I'll come to you as well.
Absolutely. When I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about where are the opportunities to enhance that lived experience for an employee. So for instance, employee relations, accommodations, that should not be tech-led. That is the people-led. Where those are routine tasks, for instance, sending out verification requests or even signing up for benefits, that should be technology-led. So really thinking about where do human needs to intervene, where we can talk and provide that, going back to that culture of care, and where can we really hands off? And so our routine tasks that are taking up our time.
Yeah, I mean, I can only yes and that because it's absolutely right. It's where are we actually going to remove friction from this experience for everyone? Where is that manual work that people don't enjoy doing? That I don't need a human. I don't want to waste your time to ask where I find out about how I apply for leave of absence. That should just be available to me. There are so many routine things in our day to day. And when we think about the operating model that we designed, it's because there's so much fragmentation that disrupts the flow of how workers work. How can we reduce that friction in people's flow, but offer them, we call it a human off ramp? How do you offer them the human off ramp to talk to an actual human when the connection piece is what matters? If I've just had a terrible accident with my family and I need to know about health benefits, I probably don't want to talk to a chatbot. I want to talk to a real human who can show me empathy in that moment, talk to me like I'm a human, help me through the situation versus, a bot that I know is not actually empathizing with me. So again, how do we get to preserve and amplify those hearts work moments by getting rid of that hands work stuff that really doesn't matter as much, doesn't have as much meaning inside of our experience?
Yeah, for sure. I see Sarah's back online, so let me pass it to her. But agree with both of you, Tara. And there's so much more we can talk about from a fragmentation and the ability to build out these ad hoc workflows. And one of the things that we're really talking about at Rival right now is, essentially how we avoid treating people as cases. None of us like being on customer service calls in our personal lives, let alone at our work. So how do we really build that balance? So there's a ton of work that we're doing to really make that transformation possible. So would love to continue that on a future call. But for now, let's have Sarah back online. Thank you so much, Tara and Maureen.